How do you do something hard? Well, meet Cal Newport. Cal is one of the most thoughtful dudes around that I've met that helps us think about some key things. How you can be so good they can't ignore you, how you can do deep work, and how you can take a digital detox. Cal is really a modern guru of what it's like to be a modern human, understanding how to do good things, be recognized for it, and quite honestly, live in this crazy distracted world. On this conversation, we go into what it looks like to be a modern human today and not let the modern technology own you, but to own it. Cal is a professor with me at Georgetown and a guy who I really love talking to because he goes deep, helps us think about things. In particular, a lot of what he shares is how we can have agency, have control over our lives, especially if you're creating something. If you're trying to create a book, if you're trying to create something important, you need to go deep. We'll talk about his writing process, understanding how he thinks, and most importantly, you're going to learn why today's creative person, or really anyone who wants to do something meaningful, has to think differently today. Don't let the technology own you. You gotta own it. This from the guy who sometimes has a flip phone. Enjoy the conversation. You'll learn a lot, especially if you want to understand how to be so good they can't ignore you, how to use deep work to do it, and how to let you own the technology, not it own you. Enjoy. Cal Newport, everyone.
This common observation in PhD programs that one of the most consistent ways to really get a lot more work done on your PhD was either for you or your spouse to have a baby. Interesting. They call it the baby paradox. Because what would happen is grad students have so much flexibility in their schedule. They're all over the place. They're context shifting or what have you. When their schedule suddenly gets much more tightened. So now we're talking, okay, the baby is taking its nap at this period, or at this 2-hour window where there's a little bit of childcare. It focuses your efforts. Right? When I work, I'm working really intensely on what's most important. And even though you seem like you have much less total hours of work, paradoxically, often these students end up getting much more productive work done on their dissertation than before, and it gets done much faster. And there's a little bit facetious, but actually it happens all the time, and it's something that people kind of talk about. And that's a lot of what's going on. You give yourself a lot of constraints. What happens is when it comes time to work, you work. Yeah. Lock in, focus. If you want to produce something with your brain, something that's non-trivial or complicated, by far the best way to do it is to give that unbroken attention for a long period of time. And by unbroken, I mean with no context shifts. And this is something that really we didn't understand in the world of work until more recently when we started paying attention to psychology and neuroscience research. But what we know now is that context shifts really has a negative impact on your ability focus and produce things. What I mean by context shift is, for example, let's say you're writing a chapter for your book while I'm writing. I don't have my email inbox open all the time while I'm writing, so this is good. But it's not, because what we know is that there is a cost to switching your attention to that other context and back again. And it doesn't matter how long you spend looking at the new context, it's the switch that kills you. So when you glance at that phone and see this text thread and you can't really finish it right now, or it makes you remember some of the things, you turn your attention back to the book, you're a worse writer for a long period of time. When you glance at that inbox and see all those emails, even if you only look at it for 20 seconds, you're going to be a worse writer for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, because your brain is now have a colliding context, or writing context into what it just saw in the email, and is trying to sort out what it's supposed to be doing. That's why I say deep work is like a superpower. If it's this common observation in PhD programs, that one of the most consistent ways to really get a lot more work done on your PhD was either for you or your spouse to have a baby. Interesting. They call it the baby paradox. Because what would happen is grad students have so much flexibility in their schedule. They're all over the place. They're context shifting or what have you. When their schedule suddenly gets much more tightened. So now we're talking, okay, the baby is taking its nap at this period, or at this 2-hour window where there's a little bit of childcare. It focuses your efforts. You give yourself a lot of constraints. What happens is when it comes time to work, you work. Yeah. Lock in, focus. I need to write this chapter, and I have, until that baby starts crying, I'm going to try to fill every minute, because that's the last time I have.
Block off time and don't think about the book at any other time except for that time you have blocked off on your calendar, and just focus on it at that point. Because again, it's this like multitasking brain that causes problems. It's not that it's not that you need more time. You just need less dedicated time.
Professional writers do 2 to 3 hours a day, usually first thing in the morning, usually in a place with zero distractions. This is like John Grisham in this outbuilding on his property in which he never brought internet to. And he goes out there, he writes in the morning, that's it. Like, this is how professional writers who produce professional books. Professional writers aren't writing 8 or 9 hours a day. They give you 2 or 3 good hours. Right? The strategies differ depending on what your situation is. But what doesn't differ is that people who are good at getting cognitive work done have some sort of strategy. There's a bunch of different common ones. So, one is same time, same days every week. That's the easiest one. These are my times, for writing. If you need 5 hours a week, you should do it 2 mornings. Pick those mornings. Do it first thing when you get up. Just have it be a routine. There, that's fine. Other people do it different ways. Either 1 day a week, and that's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing the whole day, right? Other people, it's I'm doing an hour every morning. Other people, it's I go on a retreat for 3 weeks, and then I don't think about it at all for another couple months. I talk about the professor Adam Grant in my book, who will stack his teaching in 1 semester, and when he's in the teaching semester, he's Mr. Teacher. Students is what I'm doing. My door is open. I want to be Mr. Teacher. And when he's in the other semester in the summer, he's Mr. Researcher. Yeah. You can't reach him. So these are all different strategies. But the point being, have a strategy. Right. If you instead just say, look, I know I need to do some writing. It's important. And I'm just going to wait till I feel like it and have some free time and I'm in the mood to do it, and then I'll get it done. Let's think about professional nonfiction writers, but especially maybe in the space of people who are not full-time writers. So like in the advice space, people who do other things but also write books versus, let's say, like the really like award caliber writers. The big distinction, a lot of the writers that aren't producing the really good writing do the thing where they wait till it's near the deadline, and then you see them on Twitter like, oh my God, I've had to drop everything and I'm writing 10,000 words a day, and I'm just gonna I have to get this book done, and I crank it out, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done. As soon as you hear a writer say like this was the hardest thing I've ever done, they're not a professional. Because the professional writers, they meter it out. And it's very regular. And the reason they meet around is very regular is that the total amount of high quality focus that gets applied to the book is significantly higher. It's why, like, when I'm working on a book, I typically will spend about 1 month per chapter. They got a whole month just thinking about that chapter, reading, writing, editing, reading, writing, and that gets a really good chapter written. You see what makes sense, expose yourself to a lot of different ways that people do it, then try it out. And I think the key thing is, if it's not working, it's okay to try something else. There is no magic right or wrong way. Right. But once you have something that works, you should stick with it. We hear this advice often, especially from successful people who really love what they do. They'll say, yeah, you should follow your passion. But what they really mean is you should follow the goal. Like, you should subscribe to the goal of ending up passionate about your work. We talk about passion like an intrinsic attribute, like your height or hair color. Obviously, you have a passion. So the only question is, like, do you follow it? Do you not? Is it a practical passion if it's not? And what's clear in my research is that it's way more complicated. Most people don't come with some pre-wired, this is your quote-unquote passion, what do you do about it? Secondly, we don't have a lot of evidence that says that matching your work to something you're interested in as a topic is likely to lead you to be satisfied or find meaning in your work. Like, we have a lot of research on what makes people satisfied and feel a sense of meaning in their work, and it has very little to do with matching the pre-existing interest. And so telling someone to just, oh, you have a passion, just follow it, that's the formula, it's sort of like the Disney movie version of what's really like a much more complex, like Scorsese-style movie. It's much more layered and nuanced and interesting how people end up passionate about their work. And so being willing to adopt a more complex understanding of workplace satisfaction, I think is a great first step for someone who's just starting out. Yeah. Start from the right understanding of the landscape before you boldly go marching out into it.
It's a good goal. It's not a good, the advice is not very good of how you do that. And I oftentimes describe it this way: it's about applied curiosity. Take what those interests you have are and do things that sort of help you scratch it and find it and those sorts of things.
Passion is definitely something that grows, right? It's something that's cultivated as opposed to a force that exists in its entirety in advance and fuels your whole career. And so just wrapping your mind around this notion that your passion for your work is something that you want to develop and intensify over time, as opposed to you want to find the passion and then use it to drive you through your work.
Right.
So that's one thing. Another thing that seems to be true is that the things that make people really love their job are often rare and valuable. They're things people really want in their jobs. And so the right way to think about it is you have to be able to do something rare and valuable in order to have enough leverage to get those things in your career, right? So this is why I introduced this metaphor of career capital, that as you build rare and valuable skills, you can invest that capital into traits like autonomy and impact and creativity and connection that makes people really love their work. So if you want something great in your job, you first have to ask, well, what can I do greatly in order to exchange for those great attributes? No one will just give them to you. And then that brings us back to what you're saying, which is, yes, actually a good way to start acquiring that career capital is to do hard, interesting things and get better as you do them. And using your interests, your pre-existing skills, your background as a starting point for identifying those projects, I think makes all the sense in the world. What is different about this philosophy than saying follow your passion is that it really lowers the threshold. Right. So instead of saying like, no, there's one thing you're meant to do, and if you missed it, you're in trouble. Right? Look, I've been looking at your DNA, and you're meant to be whatever, a social media brand manager for a mid-market, mid-city sports publication. If you miss that goal, you're going to be unhappy. It lowers the bar from the one true passion model to saying, no, what matters is career capital. So choose one of the things you're interested in, something maybe you already got started on, something you already have some skills in. Great, that's a great starting place. There might be 5 or 6 things that pass that test. That's fine. Choose one of them. It's not going to, better than anything else to use your interest and skills to help you get started. But don't think that that's all that matters. Next comes the hard work, which is start to do things. Finish things, learn things, build skills. Based on what you discover, pivot, pick the next project, do that, build more skills, get better, learn more about the world, pick your next project. Your passion will start to grow because as you get better, you're going to like your work more, but more importantly, you're going to gain more control of your career. You're going to gain more information about the world of work. You're going to put those things together to steer yourself towards increasingly meaningful and satisfying waters. You're going to look up 15, 20 years later. You're going to love what you're going to do. Then you're going to turn around and confusingly tell kids coming up behind you, yeah, follow your passion. Follow your passion. Yeah.